Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you on the occasion of this Brexit webinar organized by the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency in close cooperation with its federal and regional partners, the Federal Public Service Foreign Affairs, Flanders Investment and Trade, AWEX and Hub Brussels. We are very pleased to welcome you so numerous for this event. We have no less than 383 participants today. Let me first of all bid a warm welcome to our Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo, who honors us with his participation today and will make the introductory speech in a few moments. We also welcome and thank our other guest speakers of the day. Today's webinar will be dedicated to an analysis of the bilateral trade between Belgium and the UK in the first quarter of 2021, thereby measuring the initial impact of Brexit. The UK is a major trading partner of Belgium. In 2020, it ranked as Belgium's fourth largest export market for goods and was our first client outside the EU. The UK was also Belgium's eighth largest supplier. It is therefore crucial to keep monitoring the bilateral trade developments so that the necessary actions can be taken in due course. There have been, as you know, many contradictory theories or speculations as to the impact of Brexit on trade between the EU and the UK. In early 2021, the British and European press reported rather discrepant stories. While the Calais port authorities observed a decline of 75% in goods being shipped to the UK, their colleagues in Dover stated that import and export of goods between the UK and the EU were holding at 75% of pre-Brexit numbers. Such a difference obviously is a source of confusion. Today, we hope that with this webinar, we will be able to bring some clarity on the impact of Brexit for Belgium, bearing in mind, of course, that other factors such as the COVID crisis also played a role on trade contraction. The reference period will also be important to consider. One must, for instance, take into account that during the last quarter of 2020, Brexit fears probably caused increased last-minute trade activity, leading to possible distortions in figures. We are very grateful to our colleagues of the Federal Public Services, Economy and Finances, Customs and Excises Administration for their support in the build-up to this webinar. Today, Jeroen Sarrazyn, Brexit coordinator at Belgian Customs, will share with us his analysis of the situation and the experiences in the field. Which sectors were hit most? How can Belgian exporters to the UK adapt? And which issues need to be tackled first? Next, we will focus on two sectors that were clearly affected by Brexit, namely the food sector and the transport and logistics sectors. Mr. Bart Buys, CEO of Fevia, was supposed to take the floor today, but has an emergency at home, and we will be replaced by his colleague, Tine Vandervelden. Next, we'll have Mrs. Marie Desrousseaux, policy advisor of Febetra, who will share with us also relevant facts of her federation. Finally, Wart Minnaert, Brexit expert at the International Department of Commerce of the Federal Public Service Economy, will report on the current political negotiations and future perspectives. After the speeches, there will be an opportunity to ask questions to our speakers, and do not hesitate to make use of the chat as well. But let me now introduce our guest of honor, the Belgian Prime Minister, His Excellency Alexander De Croo. We are very grateful, Your Excellency, that you could spare some time to join us today, in spite of a busy agenda dominated by the COVID crisis. I believe I expressed the general opinion of our participants here by conveying our respect for the way you handled this extremely difficult crisis and period in our history. We really wish you success in the coming weeks and months in your endeavors to master the crisis and lead Belgian economy on the way to recovery. Our agency, together with its federal and regional partners, will certainly do its utmost to also contribute to the recovery by way of the trade missions that hopefully we will be able to start in autumn this year, one to the UK in September and one to the United States planned for October. I will now gladly give you the floor, Your Excellency, to share your views on this important Brexit topic. Thank you beforehand.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for wishing me luck, but I would say wishing us luck, because I think this mastering this COVID crisis really is a collective effort, and I think if over the last months we have been able to manage the fact that there is no exponential growth of COVID anymore in our country, it's thanks to the fact that everyone understood that all of us have a role to play in it, and also that we have been able to find good cooperation between the public sector, the private sector, academia, and so on. And I would hope that when we make the analysis of what went wrong and what went well in the COVID period, that we also focus on the things that we actually discovered and that helped us. And that type of cooperation, public-private, for me is one of the calling it success stories is maybe a bit too ambitious, but is one of the things that we should retain. And if we see the incredibly rapid development of vaccines, it has happened because the private sector and the public sector have decided to bring at the table what they're best at. And we can do incredible things if all of us bring what we're best at the table. But let's talk about Brexit, a topic that yes, I have followed from nearby, because as a finance minister before, obviously there was a lot of preparation which we were part of, and I've heard that someone from the Belgian customs is taking the floor as well later in this seminar. And I'd have to say that on that side, a tremendous effort has been done. A lot of preparation work has been done, and I think, but let's hear to what the participants want to say. I think that on the Belgian side, we were quite prepared to handle the friction that Brexit is bringing. I think it is the right moment to do an analysis now, because it's good to take stock early on and to understand early on what the impact is, and how we need to change to a new reality, because it is a new reality. From another side, there is a certain reality which will not change. The United Kingdom is a neighbor, is geographically a neighbor. That is not going to change. And the United Kingdom is physically not going to move compared to Belgium. In their view of the world, up to now, we could say that yes, the United Kingdom is taking a bit distance from the European mainland. The whole question is that going to be something which is sustained in the future, or is that a short-term effect which maybe rather has political motives than other motives? Now, taking stock now of the impact of Brexit, of course, is good, but is also a bit difficult. If you want to look at the statistics, the impact of COVID is obviously something which is hard to filter out of the statistics. We also know that end of 2020, there's been quite some amount of stockpiling that has happened on both sides of the trade. So that needs to be flattened out. And then there's the impact of the import and export of vaccines, obviously. But maybe we should limit that to export of vaccines, because if you look at the trade balance, I mean, the trade balance is almost a one-way street, and especially on the Belgian side, we have exported huge amounts of vaccines to the rest of the world, and I think that is a good thing. On the Belgian side, we have always been very reluctant to talk about export bans and so on, because we think that value chains need to function, and it is to the benefit of everyone that especially a global value chain such as vaccine production would be sustained. But up to now, it really has been a one-way street. If you look at the flow of vaccines. Now, overall, I have no doubt that Brexit will have a negative impact, and the negative impact will be on both sides. That's unfortunate. We were definitely definitely not asking for this, but of course we have to respect the decision that has been taken on the UK side. Maybe also focus a bit on geopolitical element, and I would like to put two forward that are important for us as members of the European Union. First of all, Northern Ireland. What we see happening in Northern Ireland are images that some of us remember. I remember those images, but that was when I was actually still quite young. But our parents and some of us here obviously see images that we thought had been gone for more than 30 years. I think that instability in Northern Ireland is not a good thing. It's not a good thing because violence never is a good thing. It's not a good thing because geopolitical instability is not good for prosperity. It's not good for trade, which means it's not good for job creation, and which means it's not good for people in general. But also it could impact the European Union because obviously Ireland still is part of the Union, and protecting the integrity of the single market is of prime importance for us. We've always said on the Belgian side, we should not create a weakness to the single market at the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, because the impact of that would be tremendously negative for everyone, not only on the Irish islands, but for everyone. Because for a country like Belgium, one of the biggest assets of what we achieved over the last years is that single market, and is the fact that you could trust the single market. So if a weakness is sustained there, it will have an impact which maybe could be bigger than the immediate impact we see of the Brexit right now. That is one geopolitical element. Second geopolitical element is, well, referring a bit to the geographical, to the kind of the difference between geographical closeness and political closeness that we see happening right now. I think that in the end, the United Kingdom is a close ally, and I'm convinced that in the future, the United Kingdom will remain a close ally. A close ally for a number of reasons, because of the history that we've had, because of the so many personal ties that we had, because of the values and the principles that we share, and also because a certain type of trade with a close neighbor is just easier and environmentally more friendly than doing trade with someone who's farther away. I'm convinced that if the United Kingdom and Europe are a tandem, and if we are on a tandem on the same bike and pushing in the same direction, that we can achieve a lot of things. It is one of the priorities for the Belgian government is to quickly knot ties again with United Kingdom, and to engage together in so many challenges that we have in common. And those challenges are on the security side, those challenges are on climate change side, but those challenges are also on the economic side and the political side. And the question is, for example, for the United Kingdom, who are your partners in this world? Are your partners in this world China or Russia, or are they the United States and Europe? And I'm convinced that United Kingdom and Europe are partners, and it might maybe take some time before everything comes to rest, and when the dust settles, we will realize that we have so much in common that trying to create some competition between us is actually to the detriment of everyone. So if you look at what that means in practice, a few priorities, obviously in terms of trade, trying to simplify it as much as possible. it will never be as easy as the moment when we were in the single market, obviously, but there's still a lot of things we can do to simplify this as much as possible. And I think we will all realize that this to the benefit of everyone. Intensify our cooperation on the police side and on the security side, and I don't think anyone needs to be convinced of that. And then maybe, for example, if we look at our trade services, what are possibilities to better work together and to work on the interests which we have aligned. I think that, and I hope there is a lot more things we will be doing in the next months than just managing the COVID crisis on both sides of the channel. But that should be on the agenda. What should be on the agenda is a way of working, a common agenda between the European Union and the United Kingdom, and especially between Belgium and the United Kingdom. And we've already sent the messages to the UK government that we are open to discuss and that we would love to engage on those topics that I have just put forward, and that from our side a constructive approach can be expected. So these are the elements that I wanted to put forward. I wish you all an interesting webinar. I hope that at some point these kind of events we can do them in person again, but it is a little bit too early before we can do that. But congratulate you on a very timely event and wish you an interesting morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, for sharing this interesting analysis with us, including very interesting geopolitical elements. And let us hope that there will indeed be a positive evolution in our trade relations with the UK and our bilateral relations in general. We'll keep looking closely at it, of course, in the coming months and years. So thank you very much. And we expect that you're very busy, and so we'll release you to the rest of your agenda today, but we were honored to welcome you, and thank you so much again for being with us. Thank you very much. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, for the following proceedings, I will give the floor to our Deputy Director General, Didier Debars, who will introduce the next guest speakers and so say also the conclusion. So Didier, if you please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis, and thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister. Indeed, if anybody would have made a bet in 2015 with an English bookmaker that hashtag Brexit and hashtag COVID would be the most trending on Twitter and LinkedIn, he or she would be rich today. What we first need to know, and I think the Prime Minister already touched that subject, is what are the real empiric results, how Brexit has affected Belgian trade with the UK, and how do we have to interpret those results? And who can we better ask to guide us through that than the ones who experienced it on the front row in the field, namely the Federal Public Service Finances Administration, Customs and Excise. Jeroen Sarrazyn of Customs will provide you with the relevant answers in as much as possible, and with a due reserve that there might be some slight changes, but it will give a first final indication on where we are standing and how we have to perceive the gap that existed, as explained by Mrs. Lewis early January between the Calais and the Dover ports. With an operational and legal background, Jeroen took up the role of Brexit coordinator in the lead up to the first Brexit deadlines already in 2019. With those preparations now as good as completed, Jeroen has joined the economic support team that provides solutions to operator with complicated or cross-border questions and custom procedures. He is therefore, in our opinion, the right man on the right spot to explain how we should interpret the results that customs could make in this first quarter. Jeroen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Didier. Thank you for the introduction and also for the warning that it's of course an interpretation of figures. The truth, of course, is in the interpretation. Speaking after the Prime Minister is a bit like performing after Metallica, I guess, but don't go to the bar just yet. I think I have some surprising figures and results from Brexit. So to quickly recap what happened, most of you will know this. Up to 1st of January this year, we have been under the withdrawal agreement, which means we already we were divorced from the UK, but we still slept together, we ate together. So we had a transition period where in practice nothing changed, but there was already that Northern Irish protocol that was already part of the withdrawal agreement and very much a legal instrument. But as from 1st of January, we are now under the TCA, which means the UK is a full third country which has, of course, that trade deal with the EU. That means there are no tariffs or quota, some quota on a limited number of products like aluminium, but in general, no quota if you have a proof of origin. But of course, you need the customs formalities. You need to prove that goods are originating in the EU and vice versa. And that leads, of course, to customs controls. The protocol is still very much active. We touched on the geopolitical context of Northern Ireland, but also for trade, it's quite a strange situation with the protocol. Northern Ireland being, for all intents and purposes, a part of the EU. Without, of course, doing a political statement with that. It's just we apply many European rules on trade with Northern Ireland. For example, there are no customs formalities between Belgium and Northern Ireland. Quickly, a recap of the preparations we made, and the major points of impact, of course, are the port of Zeebrugge, where half of traffic is UK bound, and another one that has very much impacted is the train station in Brussels South, Brussels Midi, which is, of course, a new border station where you can enter and exit the EU. It's very quiet at this moment due to other circumstances than Brexit, but after the pandemic, of course, this will be one of the major points of entry in the EU. If we look at the first figure, we had 386 new customs officers which have been recruited. In December last year, we had the last of these new officers that came in. But of course, as we have a natural outflux of officers, the net result is unfortunately not compared to the 2018. We don't have net 386 extra officers, but having a bit net extra compared to pre-Brexit is still a major success in a declining public service situation. I see there are already hands raised, but I think, DJ, correct me if my wrong questions are taken after the seminar, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely, Jeroen. Yes. We will, if the chat is used, that is the easiest, so then our people can direct the question immediately to the relevant person.
Yes, that's fine for me. So we do have, for any questions on the topic of questions, we have a call center which has over the quarter handled more than 700 calls, some of which very, very complicated and things we didn't really anticipate ahead of Brexit. I heard a nice saying yesterday, there's nothing logical about logistics, and that seems to be the case for Brexit as well. We've done numerous seminars, webinars, some of which this year, of course, as well. And we have very good contacts. Mr. De Croo mentioned that cooperation with the UK is crucial. well, we do have a very pleasant working relationship between the administration. So there's no animosity there. And we are now in the last phases of formalizing a cooperation platform. It's called BIFCOM, Belgian UK Industry Cooperation and Federation. I don't know the exact abbreviation as it's so new, and abbreviations are often used. But of course, we also talk a lot with our other EU colleagues, Netherlands, France, and other affected nations, Ireland, and so on. So for some other figures, an EU AOI registration is the first thing you need when you want to import and export outside the European Union. And we have seen a major increase in the Belgian registrations since 2016. The first wave can be attributed to both Brexit, but also because the obligation on import was also in 2017. So the first real wave of registrations has to do with boats. But the 2019 surge in registrations has a lot to do with our own EORI actions, where we sent letters to companies, we spammed them, let's be honest. And that resulted in 7,000 new direct EORI numbers. So you see, EORI started in 2019, and there is a major increase in the last 5 years, some of which also in 2021. So companies that were even now not registered did not prepare on that level for Brexit. There were also some EORI numbers that were not yet active. An example of that is UK enterprises that had already asked for an EORI number in Belgium the moment the UK would have left the Union. That Belgian number was activated so they could continue trading in the EU. So what's the effect we see on the formalities? How do companies cope with those? We see that the agreements between a different party must be more clear. Transporters, exporters, importers, but also shipping companies, they have to know and they have to be clearly communicate among each other who is responsible for a certain document or process. So that's really something the specialists, the experts on customs must guide. And it's also, of course, a learning process. If there is a case where a transporter thinks the client will provide something and the client thinks the transporter will provide something, that's a learning process. They will do it the second time. They will not make the same mistake, as there are some agreements that will have been made. But also a bit confusing for users is that the customs codes is of course the same in the European Union, but the specific procedures in ports can be different. A major example of that is Calais Dover, that is just organized differently than Belgian ports. So in general, that's something you hear in so many companies and sectors. Communication is very crucial here. But on the flip side, generally we have positive feedback from operators about processes in Belgium. They tend to say that Belgian administration and Belgian sector is flexible and is quite efficient on in and export. But an example where things should be better is the transit system. You can compare transit with the track and trace system. It also works with barcodes. You start a transit in Belgium and you can drive to a point in the UK where you end transit and you declare the goods to customs, for example. And what do we see in January and February alone? over 650 files have been started because the procedure has not been closed correctly. So that's a major work for customs. It's manual labor and it's not sustainable. Why does it happen? Just a lack of knowledge and capacity, mainly in the UK. Is it fraud? No. If the files are investigated, most of the time the companies can show the proof that the goods have actually arrived, but they just didn't close the procedure correctly. Luckily, our UK colleagues have the same concerns, and they communicate those concerns on quality of documents and so on to their own companies. So we are grateful for that. Now, let's look at the fact and figures. This is the start of Brexit, where you see the export starting a bit earlier than the import. So the first days there wasn't even many crossings of the ships, but that steadily increased. Imports increased as well. So the sector was very careful at the start, but we have the impression that the traffic quickly resumed. And then the major statistics, and also the most difficult one to assess, is the total value of export figures. We cannot compare customs data from this year to customs data from last year because it was still the European Union. So we tried to match the figures of the Belgian National Bank, the Q1 2020 figures, but then of course we run in other difficulties. We have the COVID crisis, we have the first Brexit deadlines that skew the data a bit. And we even have Northern Ireland, which is not in the customs data as there are no formalities, but they are in the National Bank data. So we try to do our best. And what was the result? If we try to match the data set, we have actually an increase in statistical value on exports. So that cannot be the right figure. It is too much in that data set. Let's do it differently. Let's take all the data from the National Bank and then take all our data. So we know this cannot be right either. But for example, Northern Ireland is not included in this as well. So the conclusion has to be made that the truth is somewhere in between. But that's also a very careful conclusion that I want to make based on our figures, is that there is not a dramatic decrease in export. So there's no 50% decrease, for example. If we see other figures, we might put them next to our data sets. But let's stay in the same data sets. So if we use only our data sets, we see both import and export very much increasing since January. So January really was not a good month, but we've seen a very rapid increase in import and export, more pronounced on import. The figures from the UK were indeed quite low. And if you look at reports by the British government, which reported a major decline in exports, well, we see that on the import side as well. But of course, don't forget the effects of stockpiling as well. What is the partition of the import and export? If the UK is, like Madame Loost says, our most important non-EU trading partner. Well, we see that the UK is responsible for half of the import declarations and almost a quarter of the export declarations. If we look at the value, it's less pronounced. It's still a lot, of course, but it's less pronounced. and that is the effect of e-commerce. We have a major international player that uses Belgium as a gateway for the rest of Europe for its e-commerce from the EU. So these are generally consignments with a lowish value. So they generate a lot of declarations, but the value side is not that pronounced. But it still has some effect. If we look at the share of the sector and try to look at some winners and losers from the Brexit change, let's look at some things that were anticipated ahead. So there was always the concern for agriculture, for foodstuff, and so on, and textiles. But let's look at textiles first, a very clear one to distinguish: carpets. Yes, they are apparently down. But foodstuff in general seems to be stable, with some winners, some losers. Tine Vandervelden will guide you through that, I guess. But then we have a major surprise on the automotive, which has really declined. And the strange thing is that automotive isn't really a sector where a lot of small companies have a lot of trade. It's one of the sectors that's most used to customs formalities, and I guess that that stockpiling has something to do with this as well. And we also know there were some supply issues on microchips and so on, and raw materials in automotive. But that's our top exporting sector from 2020 is now a bit less. But that's, of course, it's a product mix. And for example, fuel, very high value. If there is a cold winter, of course, a lot of fuel goes back and forth and can influence statistics as well. But there is, of course, an elephant in the room that the Prime Minister has also mentioned, where traditionally automotive is by value the largest contributor. We have now a new winner, and it's a certain product that is made in Belgium with a very high value. If we take out that specific project with pharmaceuticals, we see that other sectors are, in fact, sometimes the drop is not that dramatic. Maybe we see even fuels, for example, have even a greater percentage of increase, and most other products aren't dropping that by the same amounts percentage-wise. So really, the export of the vaccines is pulling the statistics a bit in strange directions. So as a general conclusions, careful conclusions that we can make after this first quarter is that the trade and cooperation agreement is a good thing, albeit a limited help, but it does provide tariff-free trade, although of course the barrier of formalities is still there. We haven't seen Brexit chaos. That's a result of the I think the good preparation by Belgian industry, by Belgian logistics firms, and also the administration. But we see that there is a steep learning process for many operators, and there are still the data needs to be better. There needs to be more communication between them, which means assistance and information by specialists will be very much necessary in the coming weeks and months. We also see that figures are very difficult to assess, but something we can say for sure is that trade is recovering. The trade figures compared from January up to March, we see a major increase. It's an increase by a third on export, and on imports, it's almost an increase by 50%. So trade very much recovering from that early January start. Thank you very much for listening. I guess there will be some questions in the Q&A that I will try to answer. And after the webinar, or after my, or right now, there will be some oral questions as well, but I'll let our Master of Ceremony, DJ, decide on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeroen. Indeed, very interesting to see where we are standing now, at least to have a clear direction. It remains, as you clearly said and explained to us, quite difficult to interpret some of the numbers, as the reference period is not always easy to be made. I want to make clear that we made a comparison with the whole year of 2020 in order to avoid special events that took place, like complete lockdowns, which might have influenced trade as well. But if we go to outside the EU, and not only to Britain or even within the EU, we go abroad, and you ask, what is Belgium famous for? I guess we will nearly all agree that our food industry has a very good reputation. Belgian waffles, Belgian sprouts, Belgian chocolate, Belgian beers, you name it, they're on top of what people will name if you ask them what they know about Belgium. So it was quite interesting to see that from a number point of view, there is not a big influence yet. However, I think, and this is the reason why we have invited Fevia, it is a particular sector. This food sector has some installments in measures that will be applied in the near future. And who better to ask that than Fevia? Fevia, which represents 27 sectors in food and drinks industry and more than 700 companies. And I'm gladly to give the word now to Tine Vandervelden, which is the International Business Manager at Fevia. She's responsible for the international trade, export promotion, and strengthening the image of the Belgian food and drinks abroad. Mainly known under the name of food.be, small country, great food. And we all say amen to that. But as of 2018, she also took up the role of the Brexit coordinator at Fevia. And therefore, I believe that Tine is the right person that can guide us how the food industry has experienced these first months of Brexit and what we can expect next. Tine, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Didier, and thank you for introducing Fevia and giving us the floor and committing us in this webinar. It's a very timely webinar, interesting moment to take first stock. I would like to first excuse our CEO, Bart Buys, who is unfortunately unable to attend today. But first, before discussing Brexit, let me just say in a few words a bit more about Fevia and the Belgian food industry. So, as you said, Fevia is a federation and the voice of the Belgian food industry. We represent companies active in the production and processing of food and beverages and count over 700 members. Both larger companies like ABM, Coca-Cola, Mondelez, Nestlé, Unilever, but also SMEs with less than 100 employees, which are the majority actually of our members. We consist of 96% SMEs. We represent 27 subsectors and branch organizations, which make us a very diverse and also a very proud sector. And here are some key figures on our sector for 2020. After a record year in 2019, 2020 is the year in which we felt the impact of COVID, of course. Like other sectors, Fevia felt this crisis as well. You can see this in these figures, which are all lower than in 2019, except in the area of employment. but still we have a turnover of 54 billion euros, 1.7 billion in investments, and almost 96,000 food heroes in our sector. Almost half of the turnover comes from exports, and we export more than we import. So this results in a positive trade balance. Export is very important for our sector. It's the motor for growth, for investments and employments in the Belgian food industry. This chart you see here shows the evolution of the export of Belgian food and beverages. Our export has been growing consistently over the last 10 years, which is not the case for average export figures for other goods and products, which you see in the red line. We only see a downward kink in our exports in 2020, obviously, which is of course the result of the COVID crisis. Hopefully, we can now quickly put the crisis behind us and get our exports back on track for growth. About 70% of our export remains in Europe. Most of it goes to our neighboring countries. This map you see here shows us the top 5 export destinations within Europe. As you see, the Netherlands, France, Germany, Italy, and Luxembourg. UK used to be our fourth export destination within Europe, but because of Brexit is now a 3rd country. There are the main export destinations also overseas, and now we have to include the UK there. Now, of course, the UK is there on the 1st place, with total turnover for a sector of more than 2.1 billion euros, and it is followed by the US, China, Japan, and Canada. Now, what about trade between Belgium and the UK is, of course, the topic of today. Looking at the figures since 2015, we see a slight upward trend for exports within Europe and a strong increase in exports overseas, both of which are showing a downturn in 2020 due to the COVID crisis. Exports to the UK, on the other hand, has been on a downward trend since 2015, undoubtedly due to the uncertainty and lack of clarity brought about by the announcements and preparations of Brexit. Also on this chart, we clearly see the decline year after year in exports to the UK after the referendum in 2016. This also applies to imports from the UK, which also partly relates to our sector for the sourcing by our companies in the UK. There we see first a certain flare-up, but from 2018 onwards, imports are also on a downward trend. We'll have to see what 2020 will bring. We only have figures now for January 2021, so it's too early to draw conclusions. So for further figures, I think we'll have to wait a couple of months before we start making big announcements and statements about the impact of Brexit. What did we export in 2020? You see here an overview. You see it's very diverse products. And the top 5, we see beverages, as Didier said, Belgian beers, but also waters, soft drinks. You see dairy products, cheese, yogurt, cream, milk, fruit and vegetable preparations, also our Belgian fries, meat, chicken, sausages, Belgian pâté, for example, and our cereal products, including biscuits and chocolate products as well. But actually, almost all of our subsectors are affected, as you see, because we have a diverse group of products that we export. Import is also quite diverse. You see some changes from the export side. So on the import side, you see top 5 with dairy products, beverages, fats and oils, cereals, and vegetables. Now, what is the current impact of the Brexit on the Belgian food industry, and what do we expect in the near future? So this is very important. Brexit will impact us in different stages. We, of course, were very happy with the Brexit deal under the Christmas tree in December. That has avoided the worst case scenario that we were all afraid of, namely a no-deal Brexit with trade under the WTO regime with tariffs and quota. But that does not mean that there is no impact. The impact is felt more gradually in different stages. The rules have changed. The UK is now a 3rd country, and our companies have to complete custom formalities There are rules of origin, which mean that in certain cases, tariffs apply after all. And this has an impact. Exporting and importing is more complex, time-consuming, and costly than before. As of October, certificates will be required for certain products, and as of January 2022, border controls in the UK side, on the UK side, will become more strict. And in the long term, there is real chance that the alignment and level playing field we know today will disappear, and that the UK will apply different norms and standards in areas such as environment, social aspects, labeling, food safety, etc. And that may give them a competitive advantage. So for us, we are now digesting the first stage of Brexit, but the next stages will come in October and January, and then in March next year. We already surveyed our members twice this year to see what the impact is, the immediate impact, and then now 3 months after Brexit. And let me briefly share the results with you here. If we compare both surveys, we see that there is a further decrease of exports. And you see here each side the results of January and of the April survey, and then the question we asked. So the conclusions are that there is a further decrease of exports, more companies are impacted, and more companies expect a further major decrease of exports. So the real impact of Brexit is starting to show, but will show further in the next months and years to come. So that's a very important note to take. On the other hand, there is also some positive news. Less companies experience difficulties and delays, even if 46% is still quite high, and we can only speak of a slight improvement. We also see that delays become smaller, which is, well, a big improvement. This is positive, so it looks that businesses are slowly starting to adapt on both sides. Another important note to take is, however, that more and more companies have to call on external services, such as customs, consultancy, transport, logistics, etc. In January, this was already the case for 2 out of 3 companies, and now even 3 out of 4. And of course, this has a cost for our companies. So how did our companies manage to prepare and adapt to the new situation? Well, they did in several ways. For example, by retraining their staff for new rules, formalities, customs, all the tools that they will have to need to use for that. There was also an automatization of custom declarations, digitalization of the logistical processes. Some of them applied for the AEO statute, authorized economic operator. And this also implies that they had to make some adaptations on their industrial sites. Some of our members established a UK affiliate to make life a bit easier on the import sides. And there was, of course, reorganization of transport, logistics, crew pass, shipments, etc. Their main concern for the futures are the fact that for certain products, health certificates will apply as of October 2021. For certain products, they already apply, but this will increase in the next stages. And also, of course, the border checks that will become more strict as of January 2022. But also there is the fear that UK consumers, but also buyers, will more and more choose UK products instead of Belgian products. So that will be a more long-term effect. So in view of the current situation and the future, what are Fevia's priorities? Of course, we continue to defend the interest of the Belgian food industry in direct contact with the competent ministers and administrations. So a lot of people around the table here today and the other speakers, we have been working with them very closely the last couple of years and months, which we are very grateful for. We have, for example, a direct sectoral dialogue with Customs, the Federal Agency for Safety in the Food Chain, and the Federal Public Service for Economy for this purpose. And of course, we do the same at the European level in our contacts with Food Drink Europe, which is our European Federation. So we are, in fact, a point of contact for our food companies, but also for the authorities. At this moment, we are mainly trying to obtain clarifications about the health certificates and the border controls that UK authorities will apply in the coming months. because at the moment it's still not 100% clear which products will need which certificates, which border controls will take place, and how and where the controls will take place. This should be urgently settled by means of the Border Industry Facilitation Committee with Belgian and British officials, and hopefully in this way we can put pressure on the UK to do its homework. We're also trying to obtain a fast and flexible service from the Federal Agency for the Safety of the Food Chain, and this with the aim of being able to deliver certificates more quickly and even outside normal working hours during weekends. Because we are working in a faster way, we need to be working in a faster way, flexible way, and hopefully more in a digital way as well. And it is important to know that our companies can already appeal to the regional export agencies for financial support for the adjustments they have to make in connection with Brexit. In this context, we're also trying to obtain sectoral resources to guide and train our companies in this transition. So the budgets are available. Companies can apply for certain subsidies. So I really call on them to make use of them. To keep you up to date, we would like to invite you to consult our online Brexit guide and our newsletters with updates. To get targeted information, you can simply create an account on our Fevia website. So please do so to stay tuned. We also continue to train our members in partnership with Deloitte on all the custom formalities that must be fulfilled when training with third countries, such as the UK, through our e-learning tool, and which is aimed at the food industry and which combines theory and practice. You can find all relevant information via the links here on this slide. As indicated earlier, it will be important to prepare our companies for the next steps in the UK border operating model, for which next phases of the rollout of trade formalities are foreseen, as I said, in October this year, and then in January and March next year. There's still a lot to be clarified, but this will, of course, have an impact on our companies as well. Meanwhile, we continue to encourage trade and cooperation between Belgium and the UK, and this is why Fevia joined the princely mission to the UK in September in the presence of Her Royal Highness Princess Astrid. Hopefully this mission can take place, and it is also an opportunity here to discuss some remaining issues to be clarified with UK officials. Fevia is organizing several events for the food sector during this mission, so I address a warm invitation to the food companies present to register for this mission. You can do so before the 3rd of May, so don't hesitate. In addition, a feasibility study is ongoing on the provision of a Belgian country page on the web shop of the #1 online British retailer, Ocado. This can give an extra visibility to our delicious Belgian food and drinks. Food companies can also stimulate this via e-commerce. So, and more info on this will follow shortly. Very much obliged for your attention. And again, sorry, Bart Buijsen wasn't able to attend. And I'm happy to take further questions and the Q&A later. Thank you, Didier.
Thank you, Tine. Don't worry, I think that Bart had a very good replacement by you. It was excellent to see. Not only we all know that those measures of October 2021 and those applying as of 1st of January 2022 will have an impact, but it's great to see that Fevia is taking up its role as the federation of the sector and is doing everything to keep things as smoothly as possible. So I would say keep up the good work, and let's hope that this important industry, which the food and beverage industry obviously is in our Belgian exports, that you will be able to make sure that consequences are as limited as possible. Now, it was already mentioned also by Jeroen from Belgian Customs that already 750 people called to the helpline, and that especially the transport sector experienced early in January some problems. Now, quite obviously, with a channel between Belgium and the UK, transport is absolutely needed. We can go through the whole list of industries, but products manufactured in Belgium, they need to get at their destination in the UK. And let that be the sector which was maybe hit the most from a practical point of view. And therefore, I'm very glad that we can announce now Madam Marie Desrousseaux from Febetra. Febetra is the Federation of the Belgian Hauliers and Logistics Service. Marie Desrousseaux has a master's degree in public administration at the Ghent University, and she was already active on an international level early on. She returned to Belgium now and has become policy advisor for Febetra. And this job combines her interest for policy development as well as her love for transport and logistics, which is apparently a family activity. So Marie, the floor is fully yours, and it will be very interesting to see how you can guide us through the consequences the transport industry has experienced due to Brexit.
Thank you very much, Didier. So welcome everyone. Before diving into the subject of Brexit, I will briefly discuss our sector. So we'll see if this works. Yes, there we go. So it consists of more than 10,000 enterprises, which are mainly SMEs. Another interesting number to underline this aspect, 70% of all Belgian hauliers have on average less than 5 trucks in their fleet. If you want to compare, the biggest or the largest Belgian hauliers have more than 400 trucks. So we have enormous differences in our sector, but most of all, we are family businesses and SMEs. Even though we are characterized by our compactness, we employ more than 100,000 employees, which makes us the 5th largest sector in Belgium based on FTEs. Belgian hauliers are mainly focusing on national transport. So 62% of all national traffic carried out by Belgian trucks is within our own territory. When looking at international transport, we see that the UK is rather a small part. It makes up 3% for import activities and 1.8% of export activities. Febetra is the Belgian Federation of Hauliers and Logistics Service Providers. We were established in 1946. So this year we are celebrating our 75th anniversary. We're active on various policy levels, local, regional, federal, and international level, where we keep the interests of our members in the hearts and minds of other stakeholders. As already said, I am Marie Desrousseaux. I am a policy advisor for Febetra, and I work on Brexit and COVID. We, as Febetra, have conducted a thorough survey in cooperation with our members to gain a better insight on the impact of Brexit these first months. So let's start. 25% of all Belgian hauliers who were active the previous years on UK soil has ceased their UK activities in 2021. These are mostly micro and small enterprises, and we see no significant impact for international hauliers and hauliers specialized in UK traffic. What is surprising though, is that the impact is felt equally across Belgium. So if you look at all provinces, we see a similar decrease. To be honest, I was a bit surprised because in the Walloon region, we see less UK specialized enterprises. So I was expected to see a higher decrease there than instead of West Flanders. But apparently it's not the case. Fear and uncertainty has been the main drivers forestalling activities. And we see three aspects: fear of costs, fear of bureaucracy, and fear of unpreparedness. One, fear of costs, it's logic. Transport takes more hours, you need more personnel, more formalities, and so on. So that's quite a logic one. Two, fear for bureaucracy. As Jeroen already has said, each port, for example, has its own procedure. So hauliers need to learn all the procedures in every port. So that's quite a challenging step to take. But here comes also the uncertainty in play. So we had a rather late Brexit deal. And if there was no deal, hauliers would need a special permit in order and able to be able to operate on the UK. It's called a SEMT permit. The application for that permit takes a long time. So hauliers needed already to ask that permit in September or October. So, so that was something. But also using a SEMT permit is quite an administrative burden. It takes a lot of paperwork to prove each traffic. So it's not so hard to believe that many hauliers were not very enthusiastic to use that permit. So luckily there was a deal. And then the third factor, unpreparedness, is linked, of course, with the second one as well. If you want to operate on a third country, there are a lot of more formalities. If you want to fulfill these formalities well, you need to be prepared as a haulier, but also as a client. And we see that for some hauliers who have taken the risks into account, it was not cost efficient anymore to operate on the UK after Brexit. Of course, if 25% of all hauliers are not longer operating on the UK, we see still that 3 and 4 is doing transport operations. And there, these hauliers are signaling a 50% loss of transport activities towards the UK. When looking at the median, which is 7.5%, we see that we suspect outliners on both sides. And it's also confirmed by our hauliers. We have, for example, some hauliers who have lost 90% of their activities. Of course, how can this be explained? Therefore, we have to go back to the first slides of the presentation. We are an SME sector, so we have a lot of our SMEs who are driving for a small but regular number of clients. And of course, if one of those clients stops their activities on the UK, it's an enormous impact for you as well. And then if we look at the sort of type of goods that are most impacted, there we see two areas, to say it like that, and that's the automotive, but also bulk transport. And of course, it is very interesting to note that facing some consequences of the stockpiling in December 2020. But also on the one hand, we're seeing that some hauliers are still waiting to see if they should jump into the Brexit adventure. But on the other hand, hauliers and their clients have also been using this first month as a learning experience in order to do better traffic the following months. And we're still in a pandemic. And we see that these numbers are also shaped by the impact of COVID-19. So we as Febetra believe that the following 6 to 12 months, we will be able to provide better numbers and statistics, which will more focus on the impact of Brexit and not the impact of Brexit and COVID combined. Operating on the UK has become more costly, 9.3% to be exact, for hauliers of cars. You can also see that clients are not paying the full price. They are mainly been faced with an 8.2 price increase. And we see that 4 major factors are contributing to the costs. 1, unpreparedness of mostly UK clients. 2, administrative personnel. 3, customs formalities. And 4, waiting hours. When we're talking with our hauliers, they are signaling the most problems when they're operating for UK clients. Especially in the beginning of 21, it was quite a burden. Just to give an example, we have had truck drivers where the deal was made that the client will do all customs formalities, but they arrived at the loading dock of the UK client and they didn't know if they would receive the customs documents at the loading dock itself or should drive to a local customs representative in the neighborhood or would receive their documents at the port. So it has been really confusing. And of course, it's not that chaotic everywhere, but we see that the gap between customs knowledge between European clients and UK clients is significant. What we also see is that this has led to frustration with truck drivers, but also with hauliers. And there we see one consequence, and that's that it's a minority, but still some Belgian hauliers rather drive empty back to Europe than engage with UK clients. The second factor, administrative personnel, is linked with the first one. If a driver is being faced with a problem, a rather big problem, he or she calls the supportive personnel to just pass on the information so that the supportive personnel also can search for a solution. So if there are a lot of more problems during these transports, of course, the supportive personnel is also more engaged with the transport and it takes more personnel hours. Of course, something else is also learning time. All of these transport personnel also have to learn customs formalities because it's not something that many of them were used to do. But something else is also monitoring of these rides, traffics. Just to give an example of how you can see monitoring, until 2 days ago, if you were driving from the UK to Europe via the Eurotunnel or the Port of Dover, you needed a Kent access permit. And this permit is only available 24 hours. For transport, which is very flexible, a lot of things can happen. That's a very narrow gap, a very narrow window. So we needed personnel to monitor this permit. If something else happened, that there was still the permit was still in order, so that penalties can be expelled. Then we can go to the. So we're very happy that the Kent access permit has been abolished a couple of days ago, but still other monitoring effects are still taking place. The third aspect, custom formalities, is a logical one. Extra formalities means extra steps within the logical chain. So the distance between the sender and the client becomes longer, which also means that each interaction between the haulier and the client is more expensive. And then we go to the last but not least aspect, waiting hours. In Belgium, we have the most expensive drivers of all Europe. Just to give an example, the waiting hour for the waiting cost for 1 hour for a Belgian driver is 82 euros, which is gigantic. And if you know that pre-Brexit, loading hours, so waiting hours were 1.5. And now after Brexit, waiting hours have become on average 7 hours. it's very easy to see that each traffic has risen its cost significantly. What is also very interesting is to compare the impact of transport with average numbers. Important here to note is that these average numbers are from the Flemish Chamber of Commerce. They have done a survey with enterprises who signaled this statistics. Looking at export, you can see a bigger difference, so -6 versus -15%, which makes us believe that since the start of Brexit, transport activities towards the UK have been taken over by less expensive foreign hauliers. But also looking at the costs, we see that the costs are doubled for transport companies instead of for, if you look at the average number. So there we can conclude that for these months, to say at least, that transport has been more impacted on average than other sectors. And of course, we're still in the first months of Brexit. We're still waiting for the introduction of the second and the third phase of the border operating model. Tine has already explained it very good. These second and third phase will require more health certificates, more border checks, which of course has a potential to increase the waiting hours. And already seen in the previous slides, waiting hours, especially for Belgian companies, are not a good thing. So what do we propose? That's a green lane. A green lane is a digital platform and a physical post based in Belgium, where the truck driver can arrive and clear all customs formalities. So when he or she receives a green certificate that everything is in order, he or she can start the traffic without interruption towards the UK. What is the ultimate goal, of course, is the reduction of border controls and waiting hours. What is needed in order to succeed, that is transparency and accessibility for all stakeholders. So not only the truck driver, the importer, the exporter, but also custom representatives of Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and the UK. This is a proposal done by several federations and us, of course, and we're still in talking with the administration whether this should be imposed. And voila, this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to all your questions and remarks.
Thank you, Marie. Well, quite impressed seeing numbers of -15%. Of course, there will be some questions later on how that is referred to with other considerations to be made, such as was there some stockpiling in December? Has this influenced the situation? But also from a cost point of view, seeing that there is a raise of 9.3%, which has to be paid for 8.2% by the client, and of course 1.1% also by your sector, to be taken into account. Absolutely. You also touched the fact that there is still a second and third phase to be expected, and this is of course what now brings us to the following topic. And I'm very glad that we can count on the help of the Federal Public Service of Economy, who is taking a sharp notice of all current, but also all possible future negotiations that will be going on. And Ward Minnaert, who's a rules of origin and Brexit expert at the Federal Public Service of Economy, is going to make the next presentation in this respect. In his capacity as Brexit experts and rules of origin, as we all know, one of the major new documents that had to be provided with. He's responsible for the analysis of the origin chapters of the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and therefore he's providing counsel to senior members of the organization and the minister responsible for economy. And quite obviously, our Minister of Economy, together with his European colleagues, needs to be aware of what is on the table, what needs to be done. So Wart, please take the floor and provide us with your view on what we can expect further.
Thank you, Didier, for these kind words of introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, of course, also on my behalf. As Didier said, the idea is that I give you today some more insight and an overview of the current and future talks with the UK. But before I do that, I always find it interesting and insightful for the participants to show you a short recap and to contrast the situation where we are in today with the situation we had beforehand. So before the UK became a third country vis-a-vis the European Union. So I would like to start my presentation with a short recap of this situation. Now, very simple here, the slides I've shown here depicts the situation as it was between the Brexit referendum in the UK in June 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and the situation on the 31st of January last year. So there you have the UK being a full member of the European Union. And as one might expect in that capacity as a member of the European Union, it has its representatives in the EU decision-making bodies, so for example, the Council of Ministers, the European Commission and the European Parliament. So the UK was really able to directly influence EU decision-making from that capacity. But of course, with power come responsibilities, and there you have it that, of course, the UK also had to do something in return for these powers and in its capacity to influence decision-making. And these are the responsibilities every member state has. And this is, for example, I only took two examples, contributing to the EU budget and customs procedures at the EU border. Now, the UK and the EU used the time, those 3 or 4 years between the Brexit referendum and the coming into force of the withdrawal agreement on the 21st of January last year, to negotiate this agreement. And this agreement contained a principle called the transition period, because this withdrawal agreement only discussed the relationship and the topics related to the UK being a EU member state. And the idea was that during the transition period, so running from the 1st of February last year to the end of last year, 2020, that the UK and the EU would take that time to negotiate a new partnership, a future relationship in the form of a trade and cooperation agreement, a TCA or an FTA, a free trade agreement, as you would like. Now, during this period, something very special happens. The UK no longer formally is a member of the EU. So it is no longer a member of the EU decision-making bodies. Like I said, for example, the Council, Commission or Parliament. It does not have its representatives there present anymore, meaning that it cannot directly influence EU decision-making. But on the other hand, you of course have, or the UK retained its responsibilities vis-a-vis the EU, being, for example, again, making a contribution to the EU budget, or executing customs formalities at the border when, for example, goods were being traded between the territory of the EU with a third country. So the UK, was still obliged to check those goods going in and out of the EU territory. Now you could ask yourself the question, this is a bit of a silly situation. What is the gain for the UK here? Because they have the responsibilities as a EU member state, but they are no longer a formal member, so they can no longer directly influence decision-making. What is the gain here? Well, of course, the idea was that during this transition period, the UK and the EU would have almost frictionless trade with each other, and they gained some time to negotiate an FTA in record time, I could say that, I think. Now, as I just said before, on Christmas Eve last year, the EU and the UK succeeded in negotiating a free trade agreement, and that is what we will look into in the next couple of slides. Now, then I would like to focus on the present-day relationship between the EU and the UK. So this is the relationship we have for the moment as from the 1st of January this year. And there you will see that the FTA, the relationship is managed by 3 broad pillars. I will go into detail later on in my presentation. But first you have the provisional application of the EU-UK TCA. I say provisional, why is that? Because the House of Commons already ratified the agreement, I think it was 30th of December last year, but the European Parliament did not yet ratify the agreement. So this means for the moment, if I'm not mistaken, until the end of this month, the FTA is provisionally applicated. And the second large pillar, I would say, is the withdrawal agreement, which is still into force, mostly because of the fact that some subjects relating to the UK being a EU member state beforehand still have to be settled. For example, as we all know, the border in Ireland and Northern Ireland, our Prime Minister referred to it in his introductory speech. But I will come back to this topic later on. But I think very important to stress here also with regards to further talks with the UK is that the FTA, which is currently provisionally in place, as I said, is only one of many talks which are for the moment going on. So we have on the one hand these discussions on trade, provisionally the application of the FTA, but besides these stream of negotiations and talks, you also have, for example, negotiations on data flows, personal data, for example, what data can UK companies use when trading with EU customers, for example. Then you have discussions on a memorandum of understanding on financial services. You have, for example, police and judicial cooperation, and so on and so on. So as you can see here on my slide, there are quite a few of topics, subjects, where besides trade, which is of course very important, but besides this trade subject, where you have talks with the UK. Now, one thing I forgot to mention here on my slide, or which I did not mention on purpose, is talks and negotiations on defense and military cooperation. Why is that? Because most of the topics which are included here in this slide, for example, this financial services or data flows, these are all topics which the UK discusses with the EU as an institution. So the member states report their wishes to the EU, and the UK and the EU discuss these accordingly. But military and defense cooperation is, as you might know, quite a sensitive topic in European affairs. So this is a topic the UK discusses directly with the member states. So just to attend you to it, that to put your focus on the fact that besides the talks we have on a European level, there are also talks going on a ministerial level, civil servants, for example, on more technical things, for example, on military and defense cooperation. And as I said beforehand, important to emphasize here is that the withdrawal agreement is still in force. So this is what I said before. I think you can neatly summarize the current EU-UK relationship in a three-pillar structure, so to speak. So on the left hand, you have the withdrawal agreement. I'll call the left-hand side the side of the past, where you have the agreement managing all things related to the UK still being a EU member state. Well, beforehand, of course, for example, pension schemes, personal, the situation of citizens in the two countries, for example, and so on and so on. Then you have I think the broadest, most important pillar of the new relationship and the future relationship, which is the EU-UK TCA on trading goods. And then the third pillar, I think, is more technical issues. For example, like I mentioned, the memorandum of understanding on financial services, data flows, and so on. And to make a clear distinction between the two, I think you can say in general that the withdrawal agreement and the TCA are more binding, have more binding commitments, a more stringent governance structure. I will come back to that later. You will see that there are, for example, committees which have to meet once every so often. These are things where the EU and the UK really have to talk to each other, so to speak. And then you have the more technical issues, which are managed more loosely, so to say, on a lower level, more technical details between ministries, for example. These are not the kind of issues where the heads of state and government are involved. Now, as we are speaking today on a webinar on trade, I found it interesting to focus now and then on the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement in detail, and I will show you some aspects of the inter-EU-UK governance of this agreement. So as you will immediately notice, I suppose, is the pyramid-shaped form of the TCA's governance structure. This is, I would say, the usual way of governing a free trade agreement, well, at least the EU's free trade agreements, where you have on the very top of the pyramid the leaders meeting. The idea is that the heads of state and government, because the UK is such an important partner, meet once every so often to discuss, well, the broad, some broad guidelines, the implementation of the agreement, and so on. Then one level lower, you have the Partnership Council, which is established by the TCA. This is a council on the level of the ministers. If I'm not mistaken, for the EU, the representative is Maros Sferovic. He is the Vice Commission President. And from the UK side, you have the Lord David Frost, which are responsible for the more day-to-day follow-up of the agreement. And then you have the more technical level, I would say the level where most of the work happens, which is the level of the committees. You have the trade specialized committees for things directly relating to topics which are included in the FTA. And then, of course, some specialized committees on a whole plethora of issues, for example, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, fisheries, market taxes, social security. I will not repeat my whole slide, but I suppose you get the idea here. So as I said, this is the more technical level of follow-up. This level consists mainly of representatives of the permanent representation, so the embassies of the member states with the European Union, the UK embassy, and then national experts like myself, for example, for rules of origin, depending, of course, on the topic at hand. And we provide our input to this committee or to the presidents of this committee, and this is then further managed within the governance structure of the FTA. And then you have an even lower, I would not say informal level, because as it is firmly established by the FTA, but then you have an even lower level of working groups, which you could see as the preparatory groups of these technical committees of these different issues. Now, there is one committee I would like to especially focus on for a few minutes. I should point to the fact that this is a committee under the withdrawal agreement, so not under the TCA, but I think it is a very important committee of the withdrawal agreement because it is one of the more sensitive topics which are being discussed between the EU and the UK for the moment. And that is the withdrawal agreement's specialized committee on Ireland and Northern Ireland Protocol. I will not repeat the name, don't worry. But this is the committee which is responsible for governing, well, the special situation we have for the moment in Northern Ireland. As you might know, in the withdrawal agreement, there was some special provisions which allowed Northern Ireland to become, well, let's say, for a part of the UK for some matters, and for another part, a part of the internal market of the EU, which had as a consequence that there was no border on the Isle of Ireland, but there was a border in the Irish Sea, so between the Isle of Ireland and Great Britain, the large island next to it. Now, for the moment, as you might have seen in the news, there are a few holdups in discussions between the EU and the UK. One is that for the moment, the building of border posts, so customs border posts in Northern Ireland, to execute these checks on goods coming from Great Britain is delayed. Well, I would say delayed for quite a few years. This is due to the troubles. So apparently some European civil servants working in Northern Ireland received death threats. And then second problem is that you had recently the unilateral extension of the so-called grace period for checks by the UK on goods coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Why is this a problem? Because, well, if you have an island, this is an enclosed environment. If you send goods from one island or for Europe, for example, to the island, you have, well, breached the barrier, so to speak. So in principle, you have to have sanitary and phytosanitary checks at the border. And there was a grace period in place until the end of March, if I'm not mistaken. But the UK unilaterally extended this period because of well, customs formalities and problems for supermarkets to get refilled to I think it was the end of October. So these were things which were unacceptable to the EU. And now an infringement procedure has been started by the EU, which is a consultation process with the UK to discuss the possibilities to come to a mutual solution. Why is this so important? Why do I point to this committee in special? Because I think, well, besides all the talks we have ongoing on the topics I've mentioned before, the TCA, which is being implemented provisionally, well, this committee for the moment has a direct impact on the relationship between the two countries, between the two group, so to speak, the two parties, because of the fact that while the UK does not fully execute the withdrawal agreement as foreseen, the European Parliament decided to postpone its vote on the TCA implementation, which is of course very important, because if there is no vote before the end of the provisional application, we face a new cliff edge scenario. Now, I thought it would be insightful for you to give you a short overview and insight in the intra-EU governance of the agreement, so that you could see how the EU and by extension Belgium manages the talks with the UK under this agreement. And there you will again immediately see that the relationship with the UK is quite a bit of a particularity, so to say, because normally most of the EU's FTAs, for example, with Canada, Japan, South Korea, certainly the modern FTAs, are managed by the Council's, so the Council of Ministers Trade Policy Committee. But this is not the case for the UK. As the EU says, we have a special relationship with the UK, which you could read as being a large economy next door, so very influential. And the question is being raised within the European structures, decision-making structures, whether a separate governance structure is necessary. Well, there is one for the moment. You have the Trade Policy Committee for all the other FTAs, and then on the other hand, the Working Party on the UK, which follows up on everything related to Brexit. And the question is, but it is an open question, these discussions are still ongoing, whether the Working Party on the UK needs to provide for the follow-up of the agreement once it is ratified by both parties. But this is something which is still under discussion. And then maybe 2 sentences on the Belgian governance of the agreement. So the coordination of the agreement is done by our colleagues of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they collect all the input, the expert input by the relevant other ministries, for example, could be myself or my colleagues for in economic subjects, and of course also the regions, Flanders, Wallonia, the Brussels region, depending on the subject at hand. So we provide our expert input to the colleagues of Foreign Affairs, which defend the Belgian point of view in the meetings of the Policy Committee or the Working Party on the UK. Now, if we then look into more detail about the future EU-UK talks, well, here I've made a very general slide. Why is that? Because I think besides the things I already said, the agreements which are being provisionally applicated and the withdrawal agreement which is already in force, it is very hard to assess and estimate for the moment what the future will hold. But one thing I think we can be sure of is that the new relationship between the UK and the EU will be, 1, ever evolving, and 2, it will not be carved in stone. Well, it means more or less the same. But what I mean by that is that, well, depending on the subject at hand, and given the fact that the UK is a very large neighbor next door, as the UK puts it, and the EU puts it, we have a special relationship with each other. I think it is important to be flexible and to have regular talks and have governance structures adapted and depending on the subject at hand. For example, if you have talks on aviation safety legislation, for example, a very technical topic, as long as you have an agreement on these legislations, on these topics, it is not necessary, I think, to meet once every year, for example, or once every few weeks. At the other hand, I think Jeroen will agree with me. If you have problems at the border because of customs affairs, for example, I think more regular meetings would be necessary. So these are all things which are not yet, or for the most part, not yet crystal clear. One thing I think we can be sure of is that the relationship will be, 1, intense, and 2, will be, well, how to say, a bit raffled out. Depending on the topic, you will have quite a few different kinds of relationships, intensity of the relationship, and so on and so on. But I think for both parties, it would be very interesting to remain in a close partnership. Now, we can, however, make an educated guess on the future relationship based on, as I said before, the talks we are for the momently having on the EU-UK TCA. And that is because if you would read the TCA in detail, but I dissuade you from it because it's quite a long text, you would see that the TCA contains quite a few review clauses and, for example, contains arbitration panels. Now, what does this mean is that once every so often you have a global review of the TCA, which will be led by the various committees I mentioned before. So depending on the subject, every committee will look at the texts of the agreement at hand and well, check whether there are several changes needed and report them to the Partnership Council. The same goes for the arbitration panels, whether to be discussions or problems between the EU and the UK in the implementation of the agreement. Then you would be needing these arbiters to discuss a solution and to propose a solution to one or both parties, or even sanction one or both, depending on the problems which are at hand at that time. Now, the agreement provides us with a general structure of review, which is that 5 years after the entry into force of the agreement and every 5 years thereafter, we will see a global review of the agreement, which basically means, like I mentioned, that every committee goes into detail about the text it's responsible for, reports to the Partnership Council, and small changes can be made to the agreement. So at least for the coming years, the EU and the UK are obliged to talk to each other, be in an intense relationship to manage this agreement. And well, I suppose after the ratification, hopefully by the end of this month, the kickoff of these committees will be given somewhere in 2021. The calendar is already being distributed. In principle, all these committees meet for the first time in 2021 somewhere. Now, as I said before, the committees are responsible for the follow-up of the agreements dedicated to them. And here under the chapters as well, you will have, besides the regular review of the complete agreement, you will have, shorter follow-up talks, so more intensive talks depending on the topics. And I only took 3 of them to give you an overview of the way this happens. For example, for fisheries, the negotiators, both the UK and the EU, decided that there will be an agreement on quotas until 2026, and thereafter we will have yearly negotiations from 2027 onwards. So this means basically that you would have a very intense relationship, a very intense partnership talks from 2027 onwards to yearly discuss these quotas. The same goes for energy, and which is more my topic, rules of origin, for example. The rules are quite fixed, but on duty drawback, for example, there could be a review starting from 2023. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there are quite a few topics which we need to juggle in the air all together for the moment. I suppose the relationship, current and future, with the UK will be an intense one, but I can only conclude by saying that I think it is very important for both parties that it is the case, and that we will be stronger together if we negotiate and try to defend our interests on a global forum together. So thank you for your attention. I am very open to queries you might have, and I gladly pass the floor to Didier or to Madame Loos for the proceeding of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ward, and thank you for the swift and very well structured and clear explanation on where we are standing, where we're coming from, where we are standing now, and what we might expect for the near future. What I can make, instead of going immediately to the closing of the event, we still have some time, so we can address some of the questions. There were a number of them popping in. We will not be able to answer them all, of course, but I might as well stick with you, because one of the questions that regularly came back, of course, Belgium is also a very important services country, and the export
Indeed
basis has its importance in the Belgian economy, quite obviously. A lot of people, we're talking about fintech, for example, but a number of people ask, where are we standing now with the trade in services between the UK and Europe? Are you in a position to comment on that?
Well, I can say some things. I'm not aware of the talks in detail, because of the fact that this is followed up mostly by the colleagues of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I do know one thing, and that is that talks are going on depending on the subjects. Mostly services is not being discussed between the EU and the UK as a whole. The focus is on, well, specific services, for example, telecommunications, financial services, and so on. But these talks are going on. But this goes quite slowly. One of the main problems is that on services, well, you have no real cross-border, physical cross-border trade, but the problem there is that you have to have how to say in English, well, mutual consent, mutual rules in application. So to make sure that when you provide a service here, someone in the UK, for example, can enforce its rights and regulations. And this is quite of a sensitive topic between the EU and the UK because of the simple fact that, well, the UK exited from the EU just to be able to form and decide on its own rules. So it is very important to know for the both parties, if we allow one service provider to establish its service here in our country or in our region, to make sure that both parties retain their rights. So these talks are going on, but this goes very slowly and it is quite of a sensitive point. So I do not expect great breakthroughs the coming weeks, but I suppose we can expect something later this year on several topics.
Clear. Thanks a lot, Bart. Maybe a question for Jeroen. A number of people are wondering, especially when they were transporting goods into the UK in December and did a little bit of stockpiling. Now they see that the whole of the stock cannot be sold on the UK market, and some questions arise. What is the status of those goods? Can they be brought back in quite an easy way, or will there be problems at the border when bringing back those goods back into the European Union?
Well, yes, DJ, there is a legal framework called returning goods. It's we have put a text on it on our website, but the main thing is you will be able, you must prove that these goods were originally EU goods, so EU 27 goods, so to speak, and that these exact same goods are returning. So therefore, we gave the advice for people who already anticipated ahead of Brexit that they could draw up a T2L document which proves the union status. But of course, if you don't have any records of how and when those goods left Belgium for the UK, this will be quite difficult. It's actually easier now after Brexit to use returning goods than if you had goods there before the Brexit date itself.
Yep, clearly. So what I would suggest to people still confronted with those problems, and if they have difficulties, that are they available to contact you, or to find out what is still possible, what they can do, or?
I would just, if you ask me, I'll just repeat what's on the website, our website itself. And for the practical side of things, they should contact a customs broker, customs specialists. Yeah.
Thank you. Tine, you received some questions over the chat, and I think I do not have a specific question for you, but you had some information that you have been sharing. Maybe it's a good idea, the two questions that you received, and
Thank you, Didier. I already sent the answers directly to the people who asked the questions. I did it wrong the first time to the panelists, but in the meantime, the people received an answer by the chat.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then Marie, I will close the Q&A with you. This is due to a lack of time, so all other questions, do not worry. We will forward them to the relevant persons, and you will receive an answer in written. But a question that we received for Marie in specific was, well, of course, the transport sector is so important. Everybody needs it. We saw the sharp decline from a Belgian point of view with 15%. A lot of people were wondering what is the impact of the stockpiling in December so what is the reference period to come up with a decline of 15%, and do you see some gradually going up to the average of 6% that you were talking about, or is this 15% quite steady at this moment?
So indeed, 2019 has been a COVID year, so it's not the good reference to just base our numbers on. So we have taken the numbers of 2018 and 2019 into account. So of course, COVID-19 and the stockpiling are having an impact on these numbers, but that's not something that we can work it out now. Looking at the 15% decrease, that's on average, and as I already said, the 7.5 is the median, because there are enormous outliers. Do I believe that we are facing more 7.5 decrease in the future? That's something that I'm hesitant to say, to be honest. I think we should wait for the following months, because one of the biggest reasons for decline I see over here is our cost as a Belgian haulier. Of course, our cost has been risen a lot, and there we have to see if companies are still willing to participate with us or are tempted to work with foreign hauliers.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Marie. This brings us to the closing of this webinar. I would like to thank each and every attendee. I would like to thank you also for being so interactive throughout the chat and the Q&A possibility of the Zoom tool. It's very much appreciated. I think it was quite interesting, and I think I might say that we can be proud, not only as the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency, together with its institutional partners, the Federal Public Service, Foreign Affairs, Flanders Investment and Trade, AWEX, and Hub Brussels. But we're proud that we were one of the first European countries that could come up with real results and real data. That's always a good thing, and it shows that despite that we are described from time to time as quite a complicated country, that the interaction and the cooperation between the various public services can take place in good order and can be very productive and results directed. I especially thank the SPF Finances, General Administration of Customs and Excises, and the Federal Public Service of Economy for their contributions. And of course, I need to thank all those involved, also the federations and the people within our organizations to have brought this to a good end. Just to let you know, all of the presentations will be published on LinkedIn, and there will be a link on our website where you can download the presentations. You can also take a look at this webinar again if you want to be recalled of one or the other point that draw your attention and you are not completely sure anymore how it went. There is a possibility to review the webinar also on our website. A link will also be sent through LinkedIn. Rest me to thank you for your patience and your numerous attendance, and looking forward to meet you again in a next Trade for You webinar of the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency. Thank you very much, and I hope that with the good weekend and the good weather ahead, you can enjoy it. Thank you. Bye-bye.